February 1959. A group of 9 mountaineers embark on a winter trek into Russia's Ural Mountains. Their destination, a mountain called Otorten, which in the local Mansi language means, "Do not go there." On their 4th night out, bad weather forces the hikers to camp atop an area called Kholat Syakhl, which in Mansi translates to the Mountain of the Dead. 10 days later, when the 9 adventurers failed to show up at their destination, military rescue teams search the area. They find the hikers' camp abandoned and a tent that is badly damaged. The investigators determine that the tent has been cut and ripped open from the inside. And the hikers appeared to have fled the area in only socks or bare feet. The investigators follow the trail to the edge of the forest. But what they eventually find is beyond belief.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. When it comes to one of the most bizarre and not to mention flat-out terrifying mysteries of the modern age is that of the enigmatic death of 9 Russian mountaineers whose cross-country skiing trip ended in a tragedy so ghastly and perplexing that it has mystified experts for over half a century. Unlike so many of the most intriguing mysteries of the 20th century, including the fate of the crew of the Orang Medan or the whereabouts of the missing Anjikuni villagers of Canada, what makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so fascinating is the fact that there is absolutely no doubt that these events actually occurred, and dreadfully little doubt that the last sensations experienced by these poor souls was one of terror in the highest degree. In a moment, world-renowned author of the book Mountain of the Dead, Keith McCloskey, will be joining us on the program to discuss his research and insights on one of the greatest bone-chilling unsolved mysteries of our history. So get ready, because the Dyatlov Pass incident and Keith McCloskey is straight ahead when we return right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places, and more can be found at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. Knights with a K, ParanormalResearchSociety.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com.
Just because you've seen it in the news doesn't mean it's real.
So you're telling me you got physically attacked by a ghost?
Like I can tell you right now, I believe in the paranormal more than I believe in our government.
There are so many mysteries out there that are still yet to be explained.
You folks have some of your facts wrong, and you just keep talking about generalities.
With all due respect, sir, you have not brought anything to the table to prove us wrong.
This is the Paranormal and Beyond, and it's your show. Call us at 731-1230. Here again, Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight.
Welcome back to another brand new and final 2013 edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking on that archive link above. That's Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Ever want to be an actor? Well, here's your chance. Log on to HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Again, that's HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Special shout out to all those listening worldwide through the KLAV1230am.com website, and all of you driving around in the Vegas Valley listening to us on your stereos. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Joined alongside of me is your hostess, Lindsay Knight, and David Gleason of the EOG Sports Hour, which can be heard at this station from 10 to 11. How are you all doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. That was such a good introduction. That's a better introduction to our show than we give ourselves.
I know. I was like looking at you, I'm like,
and I don't even know why I'm talking like this.
I see the coffee right there again, but then the coffee is always right next to us. Can I say?
Usually he's got like an IV of coffee dripping into his arm.
You know, all I have to say is I've been waiting all month for this particular show because I'm so fascinated with this story.
Sounds like what women say on a menstrual cycle, right?
That probably wasn't the right thing to bring up, Michael.
Anyways, I want to give a special shout out to Tammy Holloman out there. Just want to let you know that I love you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Well, you got to end the year right. Yeah, see? All right, let's get into our main topic. One of my most favorite topics in the world because it's shrouded mystery, death, and all that spooky stuff that a lot of people don't know.
Viscera. It's covered in viscera is what it is.
It is. All right, and this story can go many ways. It's still unsolved. All right, let's get into it because our special guest, author, and investigative researcher Keith McCloskey was born in Ireland and grew up in Africa. He lived and worked in the Middle East, Africa, and Argentina, and is the author of such books as Glasgow Airport, Airwork, A History, Edinburgh Airport, A History Book, and last but not least, Mountain of the Dead, the Dyatlov Pass incident, on which we will be discussing on the program tonight. The Paranormal and Beyond would like to welcome to the program Keith McCloskey. How are you doing, Keith?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you, Michael. Hi to everybody.
Hello, Keith. Thank you for coming on.
Where are you from, by the way? Are you in the UK?
I am sitting 50 miles west of London, and it's just after 7 o'clock in the morning here.
The voice gave it away. All right, let's get into how you got into, because this is a fascinating topic. I just found this out, me and Lindsay, not too long ago about this, and we've been 4 years tracking down.
What's funny is that I know there's a movie that just came out called Devil's Pass, and I heard about it, and I did not want to watch the movie because I know that a lot of movies they changed a lot of things compared to what really did happen. But my dad went into my room and he put Netflix on and he's like, you gotta watch this movie. And I watched the movie and I'm like, my God, it was actually a really good movie. But the incident at the end was just, who knows what really happened, and you're going to explain to us what your theory is. But
so Keith, let's get into how you got involved with the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Well, I've always been interested in the Soviet military. Soviet military history was one of my interests, and one of the theories that I have to say I supported to start with was that they were killed by a blast in a Soviet military accident. But since I started delving into it, I've been to Russia and I've been up to the pass, I'm in close touch with Yuri Kuntsevich of the Dyatlov Foundation. There's a lot of theories out there, and really, when you start looking at it and going deeply into it, there's so many things that are really unexplained. The manner of the deaths, for a start, because 6 of them died of hypothermia. The other three died of horrific internal injuries, which looked as if they'd been in a car crash. But obviously there's no cars up there. But the strange thing about it is that the autopsies showed that there was no external marks to explain how the injuries happened. They had broken ribs, and probably the strangest thing of the lot is one of the 2 girls in the group had her tongue missing. Now, there's various theories as to how that happened, one of them being that possibly it was eaten by animals or bacteria, or it just decayed. But the autopsy showed that she had a large quantity of blood in her stomach, which means that when her tongue was removed, she must have been alive for her to have swallowed the blood. It's such a strange story, it really is.
It's a tragic story, but it's one of those stories. So let's talk about, there was originally 10 who was supposed to go on this hiking by the university.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there was actually 11. There was another guy called Popov who was slated to go with them, and like a good student, he probably had a bit too much vodka the night before, and he was late getting to the station, so that they left without him, and he couldn't be bothered to try and catch up with him, which is probably just as well for him. The 10th member of the group was Yuri Yudin, who, as you may know, died, unfortunately, back in April this year. But he was the 10th member of the group and the only survivor of the group. He had a lot of trouble illness-wise, and on the journey, part of the journey up to the woodcutters' settlement before they set off into the mountains proper, they were on the back of an open truck for a few hours, and the temperatures up there were absolutely freezing. Obviously, Siberia, midwinter, the temperatures minus 26, minus 30, and the cold affected him very badly. So he traveled a good part of the way with them, but the pain was just too much for him, and he decided to turn around and come back. Again, fortunately for him.
We're talking about experienced hikers, too, who's been on this before. A few.
Yeah, well, not only that, Michael, but they were all very fit, very experienced. It's an unusual thing what they were doing. People think they were mountaineering. It wasn't proper mountaineering in the sense that you're climbing up a steep mountain, you know, we're digging in on a sheer rock face. It was a combination of various skills. You needed to be very fit. You needed a good knowledge of orienteering, map reading. It was a test of a number of skills, and it was something that the Soviet military liked to promote among students, because in the time of war, these people with this type of experience would make good ski troops, because that was part of the almost military training, what they were doing. And as I say, the fitness had to be at a top level. Some reports have said that they all got drunk one night and obviously didn't know what they were doing, but that's just nonsense, because there was no vodka or any alcohol taken by the group, and that was confirmed by Yuri Yudin. And to survive in that kind of environment, you couldn't afford to get drunk.
Well, they knew what they were doing, no doubt about that, or else they wouldn't go up there. Didn't the Russian government, because they were looking for funding, ended up funding this expedition? No,
it wasn't. They actually had a lot of trouble getting funds for it. It was a university. It was very popular among students in Russia. It was called ski tourism. But they actually they were given some 3,000 rubles by the university towards funding it. And the only government involvement is that they had organized the trip in honor of the Communist Party Congress in Moscow, which was being held at the same time. It's a bit like, I don't know, not that you would do it over there, but say your local American football team dedicating a game to the Democratic Convention in Chicago or the Republican Party Convention in, Los Angeles or Florida. It may seem a strange thing to do, but that's how it was in the Soviet times. The Communist Party were the rulers, and everything was in honor of them. But there's no money contributed.
So let's go back. So now we have 9 people who trekked their way. This is in the 1950s, correct?
1959.
1959. So we have 9 people who are trekking up to go to this mountain. Was this the destination that they were planning on going to and staying, or were they going to go any further?
They were going to make a circular route, right? They already preordained a route.
Well, Yuri Yudin had said that there was not so much an argument between him and the group leader, Igor Dyatlov. They were heading for Mount Otorten, which means don't go there in the local Mansi language. And one of the strange aspects of this case is they ended up on Kholat Syakhl, which wasn't on their route. And a lot of people find that very strange. The question is, what were they doing there? And what's even stranger about it is you could say, well, they lost their way, but Igor Dyatlov had made the same trip the previous year. So he'd already done the journey once, and presumably had a good idea of what the route was. So it was very odd that they ended up where they did. But of course, there's all sorts of theories about that. One of the theories is that they died in an accident, they were murdered, or they were killed with Soviet military involvement or the involvement of the authorities, and that they wanted to get the bodies away from whatever crime scene, if you like, or wherever they died, and move them somewhere completely different, so that people wouldn't nose around too much around the area where they died. And that's one of the theories.
And on the 4th day, it's ironic, the mountain that they did supposedly set up camp was in the Mansi was Mountain of the Dead.
Well, Mountain of the Dead. The thing is, it's actually strictly means Dead Mountain. It's come to be known as Mountain of the Dead with the deaths that took place there. But excuse me, the strict meaning in Mansi is Dead Mountain. And the Mansi language, they are reindeer herders. They live in the wilds. They have names for places which are intended as, it's not like it's a warning in one way, but not a serious warning. But it's to do with the way they live. It's don't go there, which is Mount Otorten, is don't waste your time going there in the middle of winter because it's full of snow drifts. It's not easy to get past. It's difficult to climb up, so avoid it. Dead Mountain has a sinister connotation, if you like, but what it means is nothing grows up there. There's no animals up there. Nobody bothers with it, so just avoid it.
Now, being that you wrote this book, Mountain of the Dead, you obviously did a lot of research on the happenings of this incident. Is there anything besides the initial reports that everybody else knows about that they gave out that you came up with?
Well, the thing is, there is one official report, which was, I'll go a bit further into that in a minute. There's one official report which was released after the fall of the Soviet Union, when it became Russia and all the republics broke up. There's items missing from the report. It is believed that there is another report which is still held by the government, because there's correspondence within the files which refers to a case number, and this report that was issued that's been released for public consumption, if you like, has no case number, and attempts to get this other report, the officials generally deny all knowledge of it, and yet there's telegrams there stating the case number. And the oddest thing about the whole thing about the case is the official case was opened 2 weeks before the bodies were found, or before anybody knew they were missing.
All right, one thing that fascinates me about this whole thing, that the 9 hikers themselves were writing journals, taking pictures up until the disappearance of what happened. So that is documented by the deceased people themselves. Now let's get to the camp and what they found and the tents and everything that kind of took a turn to the Twilight Zone now.
Yeah, when they found the tent, it was assumed although it must have looked very strange to find the tent completely collapsed and covered in snow, with footsteps leading away from it. They assumed that they just left the tent, but it must have looked strange because a lot of their clothes, their sleeping gear was all in the tent. But they still thought at that point that they were alive. But it was only the following day after the tent was found that the first two bodies were found. And then, they started searching for the rest of them. 3 of the bodies were found in a direct line, as if they were trying to crawl back to the tent. And the third of those bodies wasn't found till several days after the first 2 had been found. And the remaining bodies, which were found with the worst injuries, were 75 meters, which is probably a couple of 100 feet away from the other bodies. So nobody can really understand why they separated like that. It could be that they decided they were seriously injured and tried to make a snow hole for them to keep them away from the worst of the weather. But again, it's peculiar because what a lot of people have said is, experienced climbers and people who are up in the mountains, is why did they make their tent near the top of, they pitch their tent at the top of the mountain when common sense would tell you to stay near shelter down near the trees, and they didn't do that.
Absolutely.
A lot of odd things about it.
They said that the tent had been slashed from the inside out, as they were trying to get out in a hurry.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. When you see a photo, there's a photograph in my book of the actual tent, which had been erected afterwards, that shows all the slashing. Whatever happened must have frightened them to death, and they used knives to slash their way out. And
some left with like barely any clothing. Some just had underwear.
Whatever happened immediately and must have terrified them so much that they just got up, wanted to get out of the tent as fast as possible, and literally slashed away at the sides of the tent rather than go out through the front just to get away from it. And they didn't stay there. They didn't slash the tent to just stand outside. They ran away from it.
Yeah,
wasn't one of them missing their eyes?
Yeah, 2 of them were. They were missing their eyes. Again,
bizarre.
People say, well, that must be due to the amount of time that was the bodies were lying there, because those were the bodies that weren't found until early May. The first bodies were found on the 27th of February. But then not all the eyes of everybody was missing. Some were missing their eyes. The girl, Luda, was missing her tongue, and obviously had blood in her stomach, and they had broken ribs which were in a line, so it looked like some kind of directed force had hit the rib cage and smashed the ribs.
Okay, if we step back and look at this rationally, just the way it is, we're looking at a tent that's been cut open from the inside. These people were so scared they ran out. And as experienced hikers, you would know to take some kind of things if you're running. They were so scared they forget everything that they're trained to do. They're out there in their underwears and no shelter. And when you talked about the 3 that was in a line headed back, it looked like they were coming back, but then they were just all separated, like down to the tree line and all that. And then the injuries itself, a lot of them also stated that they had radiations, high level of radiation.
Yeah, again, a very strange aspect of the case is the chief policeman, Lev Ivanov, who led the investigation. He went up there, and when he arrived, he had a Geiger counter with him to measure the levels of radiation up there. This was even before the autopsies was done. So in 1959 in Russia, he was a provincial policeman. A Geiger counter would not be part of normal investigative tools. This was a guy who was used to dealing with car crashes and murders and general day-to-day police activity in a provincial city. So he was a little out of his depth. So he'd obviously been taking instructions from somebody above him, and he'd been given the Geiger counter to use when he was up there. And when when the autopsies were done, that's when they found that there was a radiation contamination on some of the clothes.
All right, let's talk about some of the bodies and the conditions that were found in. You would think the later ones, you would think because, rigor mortis and all that you have decay. But some of the earlier ones found were just grotesque in itself, that the skin was orange. It looked like they had aged. Their hair turned gray. It looks like the curse of the mummy when they were found. It's just so horrific.
Well, the thing about it, Michael, is they were terrified out of their wits. And you think about it, this is a group of 9 people, so we're not talking, I'm a bit of a wuss, I don't want to be up in the woods on my own, in the middle of nowhere. But there was 9 of them, all very fit, strong, healthy young people. And one of them, although he stands apart from the group, a guy called Semyon Zolotarev, he was 37 years old. And he worked in that, he was hoping to get his master's rating for that type of instruction, if you like. He had fought in the Second World War on the front line. He'd been a sergeant and he had decorations for close combat. And anybody who knows anything about the Eastern Front during the Second World War, it was absolutely hellish. So he obviously wasn't a wuss. This was a guy who wasn't easily frightened, and yet they were all terrified and ran away. So whatever happened must have been something absolutely terrifying.
So the first 4 bodies, when they took him back to the town, and they just said it was basically hypothermia at that point.
Hypothermia.
So that was the official.
6 of them
altogether. And then, so when did it start coming out? Very weird. I mean, when did this story start going out there?
Well, the thing is, in Soviet times, nobody wanted bad news, so it was never actually officially reported anywhere. But in the Soviet Union, up until probably near to the breakdown of the Berlin Wall, commercial air crashes weren't even reported in the media. They just didn't like bad news. There was a lot of ill feeling in Sverdlovsk, in the city they travelled from, particularly amongst the students. I think the authorities wanted to keep a lid on it because all the students, many students knew them. They were friends with a lot of people, and they knew what was happening. They were all told to attend their lectures the day of the funerals, but they didn't. So there was an attempt by the authorities to try and clamp down on any unrest, plus the fact that there had been rumours started by nobody knows who, but it sounds like the authorities. The survivor Yuri Yudin had said before they even mounted the search, a rumour had been started that the group was trying to break away to the west to get out of the Soviet Union, which he said was absolute nonsense. And there was a lot of anger over that because it was like their reputations were trying to be blackened. But once the bodies were found, then obviously the truth, well, not the truth, but it was obvious something dreadful had happened to them. But it looks as if somehow the authorities were attempting to cover up whatever had happened.
I have to ask you this, Keith. Yeah. I know there was a village nearby, correct, where they had stopped over before they...
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay, now, villagers, they have their own stories. Did anything ever come out, and I know it's just hearsay, but did anything ever come out about maybe what possibly could have been up that mountain or what could have happened?
Well, again, the Mansi have a lot of... there's a lot of folklore with the Mansi.
Superstitious.
There's talk of the Zolotaya Baba, which is a golden woman, which is something from mythology of the area, who's guarding an area. She's the guardian, if you like, of one large area up there, and there's talk that she had directed energy and they'd encroached on her area and that she may have killed them. There's somebody called Philip Mantle who's actually researching that aspect of it, and I think his results are going to be released fairly shortly. There's talk of Yeti, that they were killed by a Yeti. There's also a theory, which I would include in my book, by a guy called Yuri Yakimov, who worked, it's called the light set theory. I don't know if we've got time to just go into that quickly, but when I first read it, I thought, well, I skimmed over it and I thought, well, I don't think there's a lot of mileage in this. But the more I went into it, it started making a lot of sense, because he worked in the area in a mine. There's a lot of mining up there as well. And he was working on his own one night. And about 9 o'clock one evening, he was going into a pit when a very strong light, shone on him. And when he looked at it, it split up into several other lights, and the lights started coming towards him. And his overwhelming feeling was one of fear, because there was something about what was happening that made him feel afraid. So he looked away, and he went and ran to where the pit lights were, and he switched all the lights on in the pit. But these lights were very, very strong, and it didn't stop. And they kept advancing towards him, and he only found that when he looked away, they stopped. So eventually he hid. And then after about an hour or two, he heard a massive cracking noise like an electrical discharge, and the lights disappeared. Now, that might sound pretty outlandish, but a couple of months later, he was reading a local newspaper, and he read a story about a forest ranger who had experienced exactly the same thing in more or less the same area. And he tracked this forest ranger down. He got him to swear an affidavit as to what he'd seen. And a forest ranger lives in the forests of Siberia. He spends all his time there. He had a rifle with him, and they're used to dealing with bears, packs of wolves. So again, not an easily frightened guy. He experienced the same thing fairly late one night. He made a fire when a light shone on him and hit him quite strongly. And he said when he looked at it again, the same effect happened with lights coming away from it and starting moving towards him. And the thing is, he felt the same thing as Yuri Yakimov. He wanted to hide from it. He went and hid behind a log, and he shouted who was there, but there was nothing happened. The lights just kept shining. He was wondering whether to use his rifle, but he felt afraid of what was in front of him, and he just kept looking away. And the same thing happened, a massive electrical discharge, a cracking noise, and the lights disappeared after 3 hours. So when I looked at it, it started, with two separate people experiencing the same thing in the same area as where the Dyatlov group died. Excuse me. Yuri Yakimov worked out a theory that they had maybe run into these lights and that they flooded the tent, not knowing what it was. They slashed their way out, and that some form of directed energy had caused the most serious of the injuries to the worst injured of the group. The cracked ribs, there was a fractured skull on one of them, and that possibly the directed energy weapon had hit Luda, the girl with broken ribs, and as she turned her head or started screaming, it hit her again and tore her tongue out. It's a theory, but I quite liked it.
Keith,
I quite liked it.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we want to talk about one of your theories that's out of this world, and a lot of people think that is a possibility when we turn right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
You're listening to the Paranormal and Beyond. Join us at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Lindsay and Michael return after this. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Your ticket to the unknown is at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places, and more can be found at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Knights with a K, Paranormal Research Society.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. and at knightsparanormalresearchsociety.com. You're going to believe.
Hi, this is Lindsay Knight, your host of the Paranormal and Beyond. Join us as we attend the True Paranormal Supernatural Summit and the Haunted Entertainment Awards at the Glen Tavern Inn in Santa Paula, California. This is your chance to rub shoulders with the best of the best in the paranormal community. There will be door prizes, celebrity guest speakers, paranormal investigations, and not to mention the coveted Haunted Entertainment Awards ceremony. So come on down, the True Paranormal Supernatural Summit and the Haunted Entertainment Awards at the Glen Tavern Inn in Santa Paula, California, and meet the entire cast of the Paranormal and Beyond. For more information and tickets, please visit supernaturalsummit.eventbrite.com. Again, that's supernaturalsummit.eventbrite.com. Hosted by Haunted Entertainment.
You are now in the mix with the Paranormal Beyond, only on KLAV 1:30 a.m.
Welcome back to the Paranormal and Beyond. Join us at 731-1230. Here again, Lindsay and Michael.
All right, if you're just tuning in, we are talking with Keith McCloskey about the Dyatlov incident. But first, be sure to check us out at knightsparanormalresearchsociety.com. All right, Keith, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Let's get into the UFO theory now, because not only does this hold water, because there was a lot of eyewitness reports about these orange formations in the sky during that time. I think weeks prior to that, or days prior?
Months prior to it. These light orbs were seen over a period of months, and they were seen by several different groups of people. The Soviet military had seen them, meteorologists had seen them, and the Mansi had also seen them. And probably the most significant thing is that when the Dyatlov group left their university to head north, another group traveled with them, the Blinov group, led by a guy called Yuri Blinov. So they were doing the same thing as the Dyatlovs, but they were a bit further south of where they were. But they traveled up by train together on most of the route, but then they split up. But the Blinov group were about 30 kilometers, what's that, about 20 miles south of where Igor Dyatlov was and his group. On the night they died, they also saw the light orbs in the sky up where the Dyatlov group were. Right, you could say, well, it could be a meteorological phenomenon, but there was no real explanation for them. It wasn't the Northern Lights. And Lev Ivanov believed that this had something to do with it. One last, just before I move on to that, there's pictures that were recovered from the cameras of the group from the tent. Igor Dyatlov, and I've seen it in the actual negative, which is held by the Dyatlov Foundation. The last photograph in the series of negatives in his camera shows what looks like a light orb. It's just pitch black and with a white orb in it. It's the last picture in my book. But some people say that that's an overexposure, that somebody pressed the button when they picked the camera up out of the tent. But other people are more convinced that it is actually a light orb, because if the picture was taken at night, it would have been pitch black anyway, which is the background of the photograph. It's a highly significant photograph, and nobody can really explain it. But when Lev Ivanov was investigating up there, he and one of the other investigators found what looked like burn marks on the trees, round circular marks, which looked like some kind of energy weapon had been directed at it, like a laser, but it was perfectly symmetrical, with no center core, but an equal burn right throughout the circle of it. And his idea was that these light orbs were probably UFOs with not very good intentions, and that the Dyatlov group had seen these orbs, and when things started turning nasty, possibly with a directed energy weapon, they all ran for their lives.
Well, we got to think about it. It's 1959, so not a lot of people know about UFOs. Today, if that happened, it's common sense because of all the occurrences, the burnt tree marks, the radiation. You'd come to a conclusion that it has to be some sort of propulsion with the radiation and the energy to cause such damage, because when they said it was a Russian test explosion that went awry, this was focused only to them. It wasn't like the Tunguska explosion where it knocked down everything in Siberia, Russia. This was focused on these individuals, like they were being attacked.
It did, yes. I mean, it was just them. There was no other damage to anything else. There was the slash marks to the tent, but that had been caused by the group themselves to get out of the tent and get away from it. And the fact, I mean, some of them were in their bare feet, so they obviously wanted to get away from the tent as fast as possible. But another thing that lends a theory to what happened to them, that it may have been something to do with the UFOs, is they had Russia in 1959 was a place where it wasn't a very affluent society. They left behind knives. They left behind. Some of them had their passports, axes, flashlights. In a society where nobody has, or everybody has very little, especially the Mansi or escaped prisoners, which was another theory, they would have taken all these things. All these things were left behind. It's almost as if they were the target, and that was it, just to get rid of them.
Because of what came out, like with the radiation, how long after did that come out? Was it after the other people were found in May, or did all this information come out sooner than that?
Well, no, it didn't. No, the case was concluded on the 28th of May, which is about 3 to 4 weeks after the last bodies with the worst injuries were found on the 4th of May, and nothing was ever officially released. But if you like, the official report came out on the 28th of May. And that would have been distributed just to the authorities. Obviously, in the local papers, it was just an unfortunate accident has happened to the 9 dead, because you couldn't hide that. There was obviously going to be a funeral, but it was kept very low key, or as low key as it could be. And it seems to me that the authorities were possibly. There's 2 theories behind the cover-up. One is that they did it, or the Soviet military were responsible, and the other one is that it could be UFOs. And of course, the all-powerful communist government wouldn't want to be seen as well. Here's something terrible happened to these people, and we can prevent it. Well, we don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, Keith, that's no secret, because the United States does the same thing with our government.
Here's the thing. Upon recovering the bodies, and they found one of them was found with a camera, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, Zolotaro.
Now, if you think about it, you're running for your life, but you have to take your camera. There must have been some event that had to be photographed, that they left everything behind, but had to get a camera.
Well, yeah, and the Dyatlov, Igor Dyatlov's camera as well, because it looks as if possibly, if you look at the light orbs, if they came close and there were lights shining right into the tent, they may have thought, what the hell, we're in the middle of nowhere here, what the hell is this? So there probably would have been a panic to get out. The other thing about the tent is that everybody thinks, you just pull the zip up and you go out the front. But this tent and Soviet tents at the time were made of a really tough fabric, and they were buttoned. So the buttons were quite, time-consuming to undo them all at the front. There was also a sheet down the front of the actual entrance just to keep in a bit of the warmth. So it would have taken a fair amount of time to get out through the front anyway. So they probably just slashed their way out of it to see what the hell was going on. And a couple of them, took their cameras. They saw these strange orbs, took their cameras with them, and that's when things probably started turning nasty. and they decided they just had to run away. But there was obviously, it seems to me, like an attempt to record what was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, today everybody has iPhones. That's no problem. But if you're scared for your life and you still have that intuition to bring a camera because something is happening that you never seen before, that turned probably awry and, start attacking them. And you just got to think about that. Here's the weird part. Wasn't some of the bodies found with clothes on one person and then clothes on the other? Like they were wearing each other's clothing as well.
Yeah, they were. But the thing, what had happened though was some of them only had socks on their feet, and so some had bare feet. There was 3 feet of snow that they were going through. You imagine, this is minus 26 degrees. So if you go outside, say, and the temperature's, I don't know, -2 or -3 in bare feet, just standing on the pavement, the curb or the sidewalk. You can imagine how cold your feet get. So you imagine going a mile in your bare feet or in your socks. You'd be absolutely frozen within a very short space of time. And it looks as if the people talk about paradoxical undressing, which in mountaineering circles, they call it cold stupid, is the cold is affecting you so bad and your body, initially, all the blood goes to the center of your core to try and keep your vital organs alive. And then when your body starts giving up, the blood starts going back out to the outer limbs, and you think you're warming up, and you start taking your clothes off. That's paradoxical undressing, but I don't think that happened in this case. It looks to me as if people started dying, and their clothes were removed to try and keep the others warm. Luda had taken a jumper off somebody else and wrapped it around her feet to try and give her feet extra protection.
Now, this being a hot spot for being famous, obviously, for the incident that happened, has it been quarantined off completely, or do people still go up there to this day?
At the moment, what's a busy street in the USA?
Las Vegas Boulevard.
Somewhere in Manhattan or Wall Street.
Right.
It's a bit like Wall Street, and on some of the Russian forums, people are getting, I don't know, am I allowed to say pissed off? Sorry to your viewers. Listeners.
That's okay.
People are getting angry at the amount of rubbish that's been left up there. There's so many people going up there now, and moving on. There's some stones about 70 miles further on, which are an attraction, as a scenic attraction. But people are getting quite angry that people are going to the Dyatlov Pass just to see it, and they're just leaving all their rubbish there. And it's I remember talking to somebody who'd been on an expedition there last year, and he said he bumped into 2 or 3 different groups, Italians, Americans, other Russians, people going up and down all the time. The one thing I will say is not many people go up there in the middle of winter like the Dyatlov group did. You'd need to be really fit and know what you were doing.
Well, that's what the 9 were. They were fit.
Yeah.
They thought they knew what they're doing. Here, what is your final assessment on this whole thing? Your book, your research. What is your conclusion?
I have to be honest. Because I've studied the Soviet military for so long, that was my inclination to say this is a Soviet military accident and the authorities are trying to cover it up. But the more I go into it, there's so many things that just don't tie up to that. I mean, it wasn't an area where the Soviet military were heavily involved with. It was the middle of winter, so why would you test weapons up there? We do know that there was an aircraft that flew up there, a couple of bombers flew up there and had dropped a couple of parachute mines, and they possibly drifted off course. But then, if a parachute mine had exploded above the ground, because it's the blast wave that kills you from those, why didn't the other 6 die of horrific injuries, and why did they die of hypothermia? There's so many unexplained things, which is why I started looking at the Yuri Yakimov theory. It explained the injuries, but it would also explain why they ran away and the others froze to death. And also the UFOs, possibly, these white light orbs. Lev Ivanov, the chief policeman on the case, believed that they had something to do with it, and this was the guy there who investigated it all. So he'd probably know better than anybody.
Well, there's no doubt that whatever happened scared the bejesus out of him. That, if people go online and just look up, get your book and look up the Dyatlov Pass incident, because there are pictures of, the bodies being recovered. And it's just horrific, and it's scary because it's true. And one thing when researching this, you would go on one avenue and think, hey, it's the Yeti, but then it leaves out the radiation. And you go to UFO, but it leaves out this. So you can't really put a finger on what happened, but it really did happen. And that's the scary part, that this could be happening all over today.
It's like a menagerie of everything.
Well, what I'd like to say, Michael, though, is that I came to it with a prejudice, if you like. My theory is the Soviet military, but you've got to keep an open mind. If you want to get to the bottom of this, you've got to keep your mind completely open. I've acted as a consultant for a program for the Discovery Channel, and I was with a mountaineer. He is absolutely convinced it was an avalanche, whereas really the facts don't add up to that. But he's a mountaineer, so as far as he's concerned, it's an avalanche.
Radioactive
snow. But I think you've got to get rid of your prejudices and keep an open mind to get to the bottom of this.
Well, that's the whole thing. A lot of people, they see it for what it is, and they just want to close the case on it, especially the government, those kind of people in shadow governments. But like I said, when you look at all the facts, and there is a lot of facts on this that you just can't turn a cheek to, it just points to something so bizarre that happened, and it's the most terrifying story I've ever heard. That's not even a folklore or anything like that, or a myth. This really did happen. And like I said, people out there, go get your book and see the pictures online. It's very, very scary, scary stuff. And I've seen you took a picture on the marker, the memorial they had.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. That's another strange thing. 7 of them are buried together. But the other 2, there's 2 others who are buried in a different cemetery. And there's a lot of theories about why that happened, because there's one of the guys, Krivonashenko, and the older guy, Zolotarev, who'd been in the Second World War, are buried in a completely different cemetery, which had connections. People that were buried in that particular cemetery were, higher officials, they had connections in the Communist Party, and nobody understands why they were separated like that, because the main monument is with the other 7. So there's theories about that as well. It's a really complex case when you start getting into it.
Complex but interesting. Where can people go get your book at?
Well, I think as the saying goes, all reputable booksellers, and Amazon's probably the best.
And your website?
And thank you to anybody who buys it.
And your website, Keith?
I was just going to say, Michael, if anybody has a theory or wants to share it with me, I'm completely open, no matter how outlandish. It could be the answer. If anybody's got a theory, they can contact me through my website. I'm in regular touch with Yuri Kuntsevich, he doesn't speak any English, but he runs the Dyatlov Foundation that keeps the memory of them alive.
And what's your website again?
It's keith.mccloskey.com.
Okay, and your book is called?
Mountain of the Dead,
the
Dyatlov Pass incident.
All right. Thank you for being on the program. Absolutely fascinating. And people out there, again, go get his book. Look into this. This story just sends chills up anybody's spine. Thank you again, Keith. We'd love to have you back again.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank
you're
you
welcome.
very much.
And you have a great morning.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey,
you're welcome.
And a happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Keith. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, David, for being on the program again.
It's my pleasure. I've been sitting over here listening. It's a fascinating story.
It is, and it's true, and that's one thing you cannot get away from.
Nope.
Lindsay, what do you think? We did this story before.
We did this story. Yeah.
And nothing like somebody who's been there.
It's just, you know what? You got to see the pictures. I mean, look it up. What is it? Dyatlov.
Yeah, Dyatlov Pass incident. Go check out. Check out Keith McCloskey's website, www.keithmccloskey.com. All right, everybody out there, stay safe. Enjoy, and Happy New Year to everybody out there. This is the Paranormal Beyond. Signing off. Good night, everybody.